The woman at the bank counter was wearing my face, badly. She had my blonde hair, my beige coat, and even the small silk scarf Daniel had given me on our 10th anniversary. But the scarf was tied too tightly, the wig sat a little too high above her ears, and the hand holding my passport wore a square green ring I had seen at every Christmas dinner for 12 years. It belonged to my mother-in-law. I stopped just inside the revolving door. For one strange second, the whole bank seemed silent. Then sound rushed back at once. The printer behind the counter, the low conversation near the mortgage desks, the impatient tap of a shoe on marble. Elaine stood less than 30 feet away from me, leaning toward a young teller and speaking in the soft, breathy voice she used whenever she wanted to appear helpless. "My husband is waiting in the car," she said. "Could we please finish the transfer? $612,000 to Northline Ventures. The instructions are in the folder." $612,000 was the exact amount from the sale of my aunt's old warehouse. It was not family money. It was not Daniel's money. It was the last thing my Aunt Ruth had placed into my hands after teaching me how to repair broken chairs, strip old varnish, and recognize wood by its scent. The sale had closed 3 days earlier. Only Daniel, my attorney, and I knew the final amount. I'd come to close an old joint checking account that morning. A stubborn parking meter delayed me by 5 minutes. That tiny accident placed me inside the bank at the one moment when my mother-in-law was pretending to be me. The teller saw me. Her eyes moved from my face to Elaine's face and back again. I lifted one finger to my lips. She understood, smiled at Elaine, and said a manager had to approve the transfer. Elaine turned halfway around. I stepped behind a column. I wanted to tear the wig from her head, but another thought arrived first, cold and precise. Daniel had my passport. 2 weeks earlier, he had offered to renew our travel documents before a summer trip. "You always lose track of dates," he had said, smiling as if my forgetfulness were adorable. I handed him the passport and thanked him. There was no trip. There was only a woman in my coat, holding my identity. The branch manager came out with a security officer. The manager was a compact woman named Priya Shah. I knew her because she had handled the warehouse sale. She did not look at me. She placed a form in front of Elaine and asked her to confirm the address connected to the account. Elaine gave my old address. "And your mother's maiden name?" Priya asked. Elaine hesitated. "Hawthorne." It was Mercer. The security officer moved to block the nearest exit. Priya quietly closed the folder. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm afraid we need to review an inconsistency. Would you come with me?" Elaine's helpless expression vanished. Her mouth tightened, and for the first time she looked toward the entrance. Our eyes met across the lobby. She did not look surprised to see me. She looked angry that I had arrived too soon. "Claire," she said in her normal voice, "this is not what it looks like." I walked toward her. "Then take off my coat." She glanced at the doors, but the security officer was already beside her. Customers stared. Elaine pulled at the scarf, and the blonde wig shifted sideways. A dark gray curl appeared near her temple. "Daniel asked me to help," she whispered. "He said you were having one of your episodes." I had never had an episode. I had cried at my aunt's funeral, slept through a migraine, and once forgotten to buy milk. Daniel turned those ordinary moments into a mythology about my unstable mind. He repeated it with such concern that I began checking my memories against his. Priya led us into a conference room. The security officer stayed at the door. Elaine refused to sit. I sat because my knees had started to shake. Priya placed my passport on the table, but kept one hand over it. "Mrs. Mercer, is this your document?" "Yes." "Did you authorize Mrs. Elaine Mercer to use it?" "No." "Did you authorize a transfer to Northline Ventures?" "I've never heard that name." Elaine laughed once, too loudly. "This is ridiculous. We are family. Daniel has power of attorney." Priya's expression did not change. The document presented this morning does name Daniel Mercer as agent. We are reviewing its authenticity. I looked at Elaine. I never signed a power of attorney. For the first time, fear crossed her face. It was small, but unmistakable. She reached for her handbag. The security officer stopped her, and Priya asked permission to call the police. I said yes. My phone vibrated before she finished dialing. Daniel's name lit the screen. I answered on speaker. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. His voice was warm, relaxed, almost cheerful. "Where are you?" Elaine closed her eyes. "At the bank," I said. There was a pause so brief another person might have missed it. I did not. "Why?" he asked. "I wanted to close the old joint account." "Today? I thought you had a client meeting." "It was canceled." Another pause. Then he laughed. "Well, don't do anything until I get there. Banks confuse you. Remember what happened with the tax forms?" Nothing had happened with the tax forms. He had filed them late and blamed me. "I remember," I said. "Good. Wait for me." He ended the call without asking whether anything was wrong, without mentioning his mother, without sounding surprised that I was standing exactly where his plan was collapsing. Priya turned a computer monitor toward me. "There is something else you need to see." She opened the account history. The blocked transfer was not the first transaction connected to Northline Ventures. 11 days earlier, $48,000 had left a business reserve account bearing my electronic signature. 4 days after that, a line of credit had been requested against my house. Both requests had been submitted with copies of the same passport. "We flagged today's transfer because of the amount," Priya said. "The earlier transaction passed our automated review." I stared at the screen. "Can you reverse it?" "We will try, but the receiving account was emptied within 2 hours." Elaine finally sat down. The wig slipped farther over one eyebrow, making her look less like me and more like a frightened actress after the curtain had fallen. Priya clicked on one final document. It was the supposed power of attorney. At the bottom was my name, written in a careful imitation of my signature, beside the seal of a notary I had never met. And directly under the signature was a date that made the room tilt around me. According to that document, I had signed away control of my money on the afternoon I buried my aunt. The dead are supposed to keep their secrets. My Aunt Ruth had apparently left me one instead. The morning after I found my mother-in-law wearing my coat at the bank, a courier delivered a narrow cedar box with a brass latch. Ruth's attorney had been instructed to send it only if anyone challenged my ownership of the warehouse money. Inside was a key, a handwritten ledger, and a note in Ruth's sharp blue ink. "Claire, love is not the same as access. If someone insists on managing what is yours, ask what they gain when you stop looking." I read the sentence 3 times at my kitchen table while Daniel slept upstairs. He had arrived at the bank 20 minutes after the police. By then, Elaine had stopped answering questions and demanded a lawyer. Daniel had walked into the conference room, wearing concern like a tailored suit. "Claire, thank God," he had said, reaching for me. "Mom called in tears. She says there's been a terrible misunderstanding." I stepped away from his hand. He barely reacted. That was when I understood how prepared he was. He had already chosen his face, his tone, and his version of the morning. According to Daniel, I had discussed creating an investment account and had later forgotten. I had signed a limited power of attorney while exhausted after Ruth's funeral. Elaine had gone to the bank only because Daniel was stuck in traffic. The wig was not a disguise, he insisted. It was a medical hairpiece Elaine had recently purchased because stress was making her hair thin. My coat had been an innocent mix-up after Sunday dinner. Each lie was absurd alone. Together, delivered slowly and with wounded patience, they sounded almost reasonable. That was Daniel's talent. He never built one large lie when 10 small ones could surround the truth and suffocate it. I told the police I wanted to make a formal report. Daniel squeezed my shoulder and whispered, You are turning a family mistake into a crime. Using my passport is a crime. Your passport was in our home. In your desk. His fingers tightened, then released. You asked me to keep it safe. The officer noticed. So did I. By noon, the bank had frozen every account connected to the transfer. Priya gave me copies of the forged document and told me to change my online credentials from a device Daniel could not access. I did it from my attorney's office. Nina Alvarez had handled the warehouse sale. She was 52, elegant, and incapable of pretending bad news was good news. She listened without interrupting, then opened a yellow legal pad. Before we discuss divorce, I need to ask an unpleasant question, she said. Do you feel safe going home? I almost laughed. Daniel had never hit me. He disliked raised voices, hated public scenes, and described himself as a rational man surrounded by emotional women. Then I remembered his hand tightening on my shoulder. I don't know, I admitted. Nina wrote something down. On the shelf behind her was Evan Stark's book, Coercive Control. She took it out and tapped the cover. Control is not always a locked door, she said. Sometimes it is a password you are told you are too careless to remember. Sometimes it is a story about your mind repeated until other people believe it. The words landed harder than I expected. Daniel had taken over our taxes after claiming I mixed personal and business receipts. He redirected the mail because I supposedly misplaced bills. He persuaded me to put him on my workshop accounts because vendors respected a man's voice. Whenever I objected, he produced an example of some harmless mistake I had made years earlier. I had not surrendered my finances in one dramatic moment. I had handed them over in teaspoons. Nina helped me make a list, secure my business records, move sentimental property, photograph the house, and save every message. She advised me not to confront Daniel about the fraud. The police had released Elaine pending further investigation, and Daniel did not yet know how much the bank had shown me. Let him believe his explanation worked, Nina said. People become careless when they think you are still confused. That evening, I returned home carrying groceries and an apology I did not mean. Daniel was cooking mushroom risotto, my favorite meal. Soft jazz played from the living room. 2 glasses of wine waited on the counter. The performance was so perfect it made my skin crawl. I'm sorry about today, I said, lowering my eyes. I panicked. Relief flashed across his face before tenderness replaced it. You have been under enormous pressure. Maybe I did sign something after the funeral. He turned down the burner. Grief affects memory. But why Northline Ventures? A temporary holding company. Better tax treatment. He came close and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I was protecting you. I made myself lean into his hand. After dinner, he suggested I take a sleeping pill. I pretended to swallow it, hid it beneath my tongue, and waited until his breathing became slow and heavy. At 1:14 in the morning, I went downstairs. The key from Ruth's box fit the old roll-top desk in my workshop, not Daniel's office. Inside the desk was a sealed envelope I had never seen. Ruth had placed a copy of the warehouse trust inside, along with the direct number of a forensic accountant named Mara Chen. On the back of Mara's card, Ruth had written, "She knows where paper trails go when men think nobody is following." I photographed everything. Then I crossed the hall to Daniel's office. His desk drawer was locked, but after 12 years of marriage, I knew where he hid small keys. Inside the hollow base of a bronze sailboat on the bookshelf. The drawer contained no bank statements. It held a second phone. There was no passcode. The message thread at the top was labeled Mom, but the language did not sound like Elaine. We need her calm until Friday. Once she signs the release, the house can be pledged, and the warehouse money becomes clean. Another message said, if Claire sees the account, use the memory issue. You have been documenting it for months. Then I reached the photograph attachments. There were pictures of me asleep, crying after Ruth's funeral, and standing in the kitchen with an open bottle of wine. Each image had a caption written by Daniel. Confused again, unstable, drinking before dinner. My hands went cold. He had not merely lied about my memory when it suited him, he had been manufacturing evidence. I forwarded the entire thread to a secure address Nina had created, then opened the contact information. The phone number saved as Mom did not belong to Elaine. It belonged to Lydia Voss, the family attorney who had notarized the power of attorney on the day of Ruth's funeral. By sunrise, I knew my husband was not the most dangerous person in my marriage. Daniel wanted my money, but Lydia Voss had designed the machine that could take it. She was the woman who prepared our wills, reviewed my workshop lease, and sent flowers when Ruth died. She had also notarized a signature I never made, and hidden her conversations with my husband under his mother's name. I left Daniel's second phone exactly where I found it. Before locking the drawer, I used my own phone to photograph a faint semicircle of dust around the bronze sailboat. If he checked the hiding place, I wanted to know. At breakfast, Daniel watched me over the rim of his coffee cup. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Like a stone." "Good. You were exhausted." He smiled, but his eyes moved toward the hallway. He was wondering whether the sleeping pill had worked. I spread jam on toast and asked if his mother was all right. "She is humiliated," he said. "The bank treated her like a criminal." "She used my passport." "Because you asked us to handle the transfer." I let silence stretch between us. Then I rubbed my temple. Maybe I did. The tension left his shoulders. "That is why I keep telling you to let me manage difficult things." At 9, he kissed my forehead and drove away. I waited until his car disappeared at the end of the street, packed Ruth's cedar box into a canvas tote, and went to meet Mara Chen. Mara worked in a narrow office above a bakery. She had 3 computer monitors, no family photographs, and a row of sharpened pencils arranged with military precision. Nina had already sent her the bank records and screenshots from Daniel's phone. "Northline Ventures was formed 14 months ago," Mara said. "The registered manager is a nominee service. The mailing address belongs to Lydia's law firm." She pulled a chart onto the center monitor. Blue lines connected my workshop, our household account, and 3 companies I had never heard of. $48,000 from my reserve account had moved through Northline and then split into smaller payments: a luxury apartment deposit, a private school tuition payment, and a consulting fee to Daniel. "Private school?" I asked. "We don't have children." Mara clicked the payment details. The student's surname was Voss. Lydia had a 14-year-old daughter. Daniel once told me Lydia's ex-husband refused to pay tuition. At the time, I thought he was repeating office gossip. Now I wondered how many intimate facts they had exchanged while I sat beside him believing he was answering work emails. "Are they having an affair?" I asked. "Bank records can prove money," Mara said. "They cannot prove love. But people rarely commit felonies for casual acquaintances." The warehouse trust contained our first piece of good news. Ruth had placed the building into a separate trust 5 years before I married Daniel. The sale proceeds remained my separate property, unless I deliberately transferred them into a marital account. Daniel's forged power of attorney was intended to create that transfer. Once the money passed through Northline and returned under his control, he could claim it had been commingled. He did not just want to steal it, I said. He wanted to make the theft look like a financial decision I approved. Mara nodded. And the photographs suggest a second strategy. If you challenge the documents, they plan to challenge your reliability. Nina joined us by video call. She had obtained a copy of the loan application against my house. The notary seal belonged to Lydia. The witness address belonged to Elaine. The application claimed the money would fund renovations to the property, but the proposed disbursement account was controlled by Northline. "We can seek an emergency order today," Nina said. "But if we move too visibly, Daniel and Lydia may destroy evidence." "What happens Friday?" I asked. Nina looked at the messages again. "A release is usually the final piece in a transaction or settlement. We need to know what release they expect you to sign." I remembered Daniel mentioning an anniversary dinner. Our anniversary was still 2 weeks away, but he had said he wanted to celebrate early because his schedule was crowded. A suite had been reserved at the Bellwether Hotel for Friday night. Mara leaned back. "He plans to put documents in front of you somewhere private." "Then we let him." Nina's answer was immediate. "Not alone." By noon, the detective assigned to the passport case had the screenshots and agreed to coordinate with bank investigators. We created a new phone, a new email account, and a phrase I could text if Daniel prevented me from leaving. Nina arranged for a licensed investigator to occupy the hotel room next door. Mara would monitor any movement from the frozen accounts. I spent the afternoon at the workshop. The scent of cedar and linseed oil usually calmed me. That day, every familiar object looked like evidence from my former life. Daniel's coffee mug sat beside the sink. A framed photograph showed us laughing at a summer fair. I studied my own face and tried to remember whether I had been happy or merely unaware. At 4, a notification appeared on the secure phone. Priya had sent a still image from the bank's exterior camera. It showed Elaine arriving in Daniel's car. A second person was driving, but glare concealed the face. The timestamp was 8:46. Daniel had called me at 9:23 and claimed he was stuck in traffic across town. That evening, he came home with white roses. He found me on the sofa pretending to read. "I made a reservation for Friday," he said. "Just us. No banks, no lawyers, no family drama." "That sounds nice." He sat beside me and placed a slim folder on the coffee table. "There will be one small piece of paperwork. Lydia corrected the misunderstanding with the investment account. You sign, the bank releases the funds, and we put this ugliness behind us." "Can I read it now?" His smile remained, but something behind it hardened. "It is only a draft." He slid the folder away before I could touch it. Later, while he showered, I checked the dust around the bronze sailboat. My photograph showed a clean semicircle. Now a finger-width line cut through it. Daniel knew someone had opened the drawer. I heard the water stop upstairs. His footsteps crossed the bedroom, then paused directly above me. My secure phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Mara filled the screen. "Do not eat or drink anything he gives you. We found a pharmacy payment on Northline's card. The prescription was filled in your name." The prescription in my name was for a sedative I had never taken. Daniel had filled it 3 times in 6 months. Suddenly, I remembered mornings when I woke with a metallic taste in my mouth. Entire conversations he claimed we had, and papers he said I had misplaced. I had blamed grief, long workdays, and my own carelessness. Now every missing hour felt occupied by him. I did not wait for Friday. I walked upstairs, opened the bathroom door, and found Daniel buttoning his shirt in front of the mirror. Steam softened the edges of the room. For a moment, he looked like the man I had married, handsome, composed, faintly amused by the world. "Did you put medication in my drinks?" I asked. His reflection froze. I had broken the plan. Nina had told me not to confront him, but some questions become heavier than caution. I needed to see his face before he had time to choose it. He turned slowly. "What are you talking about?" "A prescription was filled in my name. You asked Lydia to help you get something for sleep after Ruth died." "Lydia is not a doctor." "No, but she recommended one." He reached for my arm. I stepped back. The warmth disappeared from his voice. "You went through my office." It was not a question. "I was looking for my passport." "And found what?" My pulse hammered, but I kept my expression uncertain. "Nothing. The drawer was locked." He studied me for several seconds. Then he smiled and touched my cheek. This is exactly what worries me, Claire. You accuse people, forget what you did, and frighten yourself. Friday will settle everything. That night, I slept in the guest room with a chair under the door handle. At dawn, I left for the workshop and did not return. Nina filed for a protective order covering the house, my business, and every financial account in my name. The detective collected my hairbrush and an unopened bottle of wine from the kitchen. Testing would take time, but the prescription record was enough to widen the investigation. Daniel sent 12 messages. The first 4 were loving. The next 3 were offended. Then came anger, apology, and concern. The final message said, "If you keep behaving irrationally, I will have no choice but to request an emergency mental health evaluation." Nina read it and said, "He just put the threat in writing." Friday evening, I went to the Bellwether Hotel anyway. The hotel had brass lamps, dark blue carpet, and a pianist playing songs people recognized but could not name. Daniel waited in the restaurant wearing the charcoal suit I had bought for his 40th birthday. A bottle of champagne stood unopened in an ice bucket. He rose when I approached, as though we were beginning a romantic evening rather than documenting the end of our marriage. "I knew you would come," he said. "You said we could fix this." "We can." I carried a handbag containing a clean phone, a recorder legal under our state's one-party consent rule, and a panic button connected to the investigator next door. Nina had reviewed every step. I ordered sparkling water and watched the waiter open the bottle at the table. Daniel spoke gently through dinner. He reminded me of our first apartment, the rainy day we adopted our dog, the week he slept in a chair beside Ruth's hospital bed. Some memories were true. That made them more dangerous. A dishonest person does not need to invent an entire marriage. He only needs to use its tender parts as handles. After dessert, Lydia joined us. She wore a cream suit and carried the slim folder from our living room. She kissed my cheek before sitting down. "I am so sorry this became frightening," she said. "Grief can distort ordinary events." "Did grief forge my signature?" Daniel exhaled sharply. Lydia did not blink. "No one forged anything," she said. "You signed a limited authorization. Today's document simply confirms your intent and protects Daniel from future accusations." She opened the folder. The release stated that I had voluntarily authorized all transfers, that any confusion resulted from a temporary cognitive condition, and that Daniel had acted in good faith. A second document transferred the house into a newly formed marital holding company. A third instructed the bank to send the warehouse proceeds to Northline. 3 signatures, Lydia said. Then this nightmare is over. "Why did Elaine wear my wig?" Daniel looked toward the restaurant entrance. Lydia answered first. "She did not. The bank has video. Video can be misinterpreted." "And the sedatives?" Daniel's hand closed around his glass. Lydia's eyes moved to him for half a second. That glance told me she had not expected the question. "Claire has insomnia," Daniel said. "Claire is sitting here," I replied. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Sign the papers. You can keep the workshop and enough money to be comfortable. Fight me, and every photograph, every forgotten appointment, every glass of wine becomes evidence that you cannot manage your own affairs." There it was. Not concern, not confusion, a threat spoken clearly into the recorder. "How much is enough money?" I asked. His expression softened. He mistook the question for surrender. 200,000, more than most people ever get after a divorce. "From the 612,000 Ruth left me?" "From everything we built together." "You mean everything I built while you moved money to Lydia?" Lydia stood. "This meeting is over." The investigator appeared beside her before she took 2 steps. 2 detectives entered from the lobby. Daniel looked at my handbag, then at my face. "You recorded me." I remembered how. The police did not arrest them immediately. Real life rarely provides handcuffs at the exact moment an audience wants them. The detective separated us, collected the documents, and warned Daniel and Lydia not to contact me. Lydia kept insisting the papers were drafts. Daniel said he had spoken under emotional pressure. Then Mara called. The blocked $612,000 transfer had never reached Northline. But while we sat at dinner, someone using Lydia's credentials had accessed an older workshop account the bank did not know to freeze. $187,000 was gone. $187,000 disappeared in 7 minutes. The transfer bounced through 4 accounts and ended at a company called Harbor Finch Consulting. Lydia claimed she had never heard of it. Daniel claimed he was with me when it happened. For the first time, both of them were telling the truth. Harbor Finch belonged to Elaine. The discovery split their alliance faster than any threat from the police. Daniel said his mother had acted alone. Lydia said Daniel had given Elaine every password. Elaine said nothing for 6 days, then hired her own attorney and requested a meeting with prosecutors. I did not attend. Nina told me to stay focused on the emergency civil hearing that would decide who controlled the house, the workshop accounts, and the remaining sale proceeds while the criminal investigation continued. Daniel arrived at court with a gray folder full of photographs. I recognized the one of me asleep on the sofa. I recognized the kitchen image with the open wine bottle. There were also appointment calendars marked with events I had supposedly missed, and a letter from a therapist I had never met. His attorney described him as a devoted husband, forced to intervene because his wife's mental condition had deteriorated after bereavement. The forged transfers became responsible attempts to preserve marital assets. Elaine's appearance at the bank became a confused older woman trying to complete an errand for a family in crisis. Listening to strangers discuss my mind made me feel as though I were standing outside my own body. Daniel watched me with gentle sorrow. That expression had controlled me for years. Whenever I objected, he looked hurt. Whenever I remembered differently, he looked afraid for me. Robin Stern called this pattern the gradual erosion of another person's trust in her own perception in the gaslight effect. I had once assumed gaslighting meant obvious lies. Daniel had taught me that its most effective form often sounds like concern. Nina began with the bank video. The courtroom monitor showed Elaine stepping out of Daniel's car in my beige coat. Another camera captured Daniel at the wheel. The image was clear enough to show him turning toward the entrance as Elaine adjusted the blonde wig. Daniel's attorney objected. Nina moved to the forged power of attorney. A document examiner had compared the signature with 20 genuine samples. The formation, pressure, and pen lifts were inconsistent with my writing, but matched practice signatures found on a pad recovered from Lydia's office. Then came the prescription records. The doctor listed on the bottle testified that he had never examined me. Lydia had described me as an existing patient and submitted my insurance information through an online service. Toxicology testing of the wine bottle found residue consistent with the prescribed sedative. The judge looked at Daniel. His expression of patient sorrow was gone. His attorney asked for a recess. The judge refused. Mara testified about Northline, the tuition payment, and the hidden transfers. She explained the pattern in plain language. Money left accounts I controlled, passed through a company tied to Lydia, paid Daniel, and returned as assets held outside my name. The process was designed not only to remove money, but to rewrite its history. Daniel whispered furiously to his attorney. I saw the moment he decided to sacrifice his mother. When he took the stand, he claimed Elaine had become obsessed with protecting him from an unhappy marriage. She stole my passport, pressured Lydia, and created Harbor Finch without his knowledge. Daniel admitted driving her to the bank, but said he believed she was meeting a financial advisor. Your mother wore your wife's coat and a blonde wig, Nina said. Did you believe that was normal attire for a financial meeting? I did not notice the wig. You were looking directly at her in the video. My mother changes her hair often. Did she also change her name to Claire? The silence that followed was the first honest thing Daniel had offered all day. Nina placed his second phone into evidence. Daniel denied owning it until the service provider confirmed his identity and billing address. He denied writing the messages until the forensic report showed they had been sent from our home network. Finally, he said Lydia had manipulated him. Lydia's attorney immediately requested a separate hearing. The judge issued temporary orders freezing every identified account, barring Daniel from the house and workshop, and placing the remaining inheritance under independent control. It was not a final victory, but it was the first night in 12 years that he had no legal key to my life. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited near the steps. I kept my head down. Nina guided me toward her car, but a woman called my name. Elaine stood beside a pillar without makeup. Her natural gray hair was cut close to her head. She looked smaller than she had at every holiday table, as if losing the wig had removed more than a disguise. "I need to speak to you," she said, "through your attorney. Daniel is lying about Harbor Finch." "All of you are lying," she flinched. "Yes, but not about this." Her attorney approached, carrying a red ledger and a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside the bag was a flash drive. Elaine told us Daniel had created Harbor Finch 2 years earlier using her identity. He directed every transfer and gave her cash in exchange for signatures. She had agreed to impersonate me at the bank because he promised to buy her a house and said I would never prosecute family. When the $612,000 transfer failed, he ordered her to move the workshop money as insurance. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. Her face twisted. "Because in court he called me a confused old woman. That was the story we prepared for you." Daniel had built the same cage for both of us. The only difference was that Elaine had helped him build mine first. The red ledger contained dates, account numbers, and cash payments going back 3 years. The flash drive held audio recordings Elaine had secretly made after she began to suspect Daniel would blame her. Her cooperation could reduce her punishment, but it would not erase what she had done. Mara examined the first page and went still. "The missing money did not end at Harbor Finch," she said. "It purchased a property." "What property?" She turned the ledger toward me. The address belonged to a lake house 200 miles north. The registered owner was not Daniel, Elaine, or Lydia. It was a woman named Sophie Mercer, listed in the records as Daniel's wife. Daniel had another wife. For 3 hours, that sentence was the only fact my mind could hold. Not another girlfriend, not a secret fiancé, a wife. Sophie Mercer had married Daniel in a courthouse ceremony 18 months before he married me. No divorce had ever been filed. Nina verified the marriage record twice. Daniel had used his full legal name and correct birth date. He had simply moved counties, shortened his middle name on some documents, and trusted that 2 women would never compare paperwork. My marriage to him was legally invalid from the beginning. Sophie lived at the lake house with a 16-year-old son. When investigators contacted her, she believed Daniel worked overseas and visited only a few weeks each year. He had told her I was his business partner. The photographs of us online were, according to him, marketing for the restoration company. The scale of the deception should have made it less personal. Instead, it clarified everything. Daniel did not betray people because one relationship failed. Betrayal was the structure in which he lived. Each person knew a different version of him and guarded one wall of the structure without seeing the whole building. Sophie agreed to meet me at Nina's office. She was 44, with dark hair, careful eyes, and the exhausted posture of someone who had spent the night rereading her entire life. "He said the lake house was paid for by consulting bonuses," she told me. "He kept the accounts because I am a nurse and work long shifts. He said finances overwhelmed me." The same sentence, with one profession changed. She brought tax returns, insurance forms, and a tablet Daniel used during his visits. The tablet contained a spreadsheet dividing his life into columns: Claire, Sophie, Mom, Lydia. Beside each name were schedules, passwords, fears, and pressure points. Mine read, abandonment, memory, Ruth. Sophie's read, son, debt, hospital schedule. We were not women he loved badly. We were systems he managed. The spreadsheet allowed Mara to trace the missing money. The $187,000 had funded the lake house renovation, but title insurance showed the property had been purchased partly with money from Sophie's late father. Daniel had stolen from 2 inheritances and used each woman's loss to conceal the other. Once Sophie joined the case, the financial puzzle collapsed quickly. She identified an account Daniel had told investigators belonged to a foreign client. Elaine's recordings connected him to Northline. Lydia's calendar placed all 3 of them together on the days the false documents were created. Faced with evidence of fraud, identity theft, unlawful medication, and bigamy, Daniel stopped describing himself as a concerned husband. He began negotiating. Lydia negotiated too. She surrendered her license, provided access to her firm's records, and admitted preparing the false power of attorney. Elaine pleaded guilty to identity fraud and returned the money remaining in Harbor Finch. Their final sentences belonged to the court, not to me. I attended only when my testimony was required. People asked whether watching them punished made me feel whole. It did not. Punishment is an accounting. Healing is construction. One can be ordered by a judge. The other has to be done in quiet rooms after everyone stops watching. Freud's work on betrayal trauma describes why the mind may overlook danger when recognizing it threatens a relationship on which safety seems to depend. That idea helped me stop asking the cruelest question: how could I not have known? I had noticed hundreds of small wrong things. I had simply been trained to explain each one away so that my home could continue feeling like home. The court restored every recoverable dollar to the correct owners. The lake house was sold. Sophie received the money taken from her father's estate, and I recovered the workshop funds. The blocked warehouse transfer had never left the bank, and Ruth's trust kept Daniel from claiming any part of it. My house remained mine. The financial result looked clean on paper. Life was not. For months, I woke at 2 in the morning and checked the locks. I kept receipts for purchases no one questioned. I apologized before stating simple preferences. When a friend offered to organize my paperwork, my throat closed so suddenly I could not speak. I began seeing a therapist who never told me what I must have forgotten. She asked what I remembered and waited for the answer. Nina taught me to read every line of a contract without shame. Mara showed me how to create account alerts, separate permissions, and verification rules that no spouse or advisor could change alone. I returned to the workshop in early spring. My first project was Ruth's roll-top desk. I cleaned the brass fittings, repaired a split in the oak panel, and left one scratch untouched. Ruth used to say restoration was not the art of making damage disappear. It was the art of making an object strong enough to carry its history. 6 months later, I began hosting a free monthly evening at the workshop. We called it Open Ledger. A lawyer, an accountant, and a counselor answered practical questions about shared accounts, credit reports, property documents, and financial control. We did not tell women to leave their marriages. We helped them see the doors. At the first meeting, 9 people came. At the 4th, there were 43. Elaine wrote me twice from jail. The first letter was an apology that spent 3 pages explaining why Daniel was persuasive. I did not answer. The second contained no excuses. She wrote that she had spent years calling cruelty loyalty, because admitting the truth would mean admitting what she had taught her son. I placed the letter in Ruth's cedar box and still did not answer. Forgiveness was no longer an obligation someone else could assign me. Almost a year after the morning at the bank, Priya invited me to speak at a staff training about identity fraud. Afterward, she gave me a sealed envelope found in the warehouse closing file. It contained one final note from Ruth. I had always believed coincidence brought me to the bank at the exact minute Elaine stood at the counter. It had not. Ruth had instructed Priya to call my workshop at 8:30 on the first business morning after the sale. If Daniel answered, she was to say nothing. If I answered, she was to remind me that the old joint account had to be closed in person before 9:30. Priya had followed those instructions. I had forgotten the call in the shock of everything that followed. Ruth had suspected Daniel. She did not know what he would do, and she could not accuse him without proof. So she left a key, a ledger, a lawyer's name, and one carefully timed reminder. She did not rescue me from beyond the grave. She placed tools where I could reach them and trusted me to use them. I stood outside the bank holding her note while morning light moved across the glass doors. 1 year earlier, I had entered that building believing my marriage, my memory, and my money belonged partly to a man who claimed to understand them better than I did. This time, I walked out knowing something simpler. My name was mine, my work was mine, my memory was mine, and no one would ever again convince me that love required a signature I was not allowed to read. Sources used for the psychological background of this story include Evan Stark, Coercive Control, How Men Entrap Women in Personal Life, Robin Stern, The Gaslight Effect, and Jennifer J. Frade, Betrayal Trauma, The Logic of Forgetting Childhood Abuse. The characters and events in this narrative are fictional,